is Kyle Tucker number one, right? Is Kyle Tucker the player that would most piss off the Dodgers, like piss people off that the Dodgers signed them? Is it Murakami? Because it's like every good Japanese player just ends up with the Dodgers. Is it Bo Bichette? Hello and welcome to Baseball Barbacast, the only baseball podcast in the world that believes there's no such thing as a free agent. I'm Jake Mintz, that's Jordan Shusterman. Got to pay for these players.
But they are free to sign with whoever they want. But also, there's only some teams that are actually going to give out money to these players. And that is why we are going to spend this episode of Baseball Barbacast. Finally, you've been already in free agency mode over the last few weeks. What are you guys waiting for? Come on, let's start talking about the hot stuff. We're doing it here on this Tuesday edition of Baseball Barbacast. And that is, in fact, by the way, we don't even have to start speculating because we have some actual news, and that is our opener.
Consider the market jumped. It is November 18th. The turkeys have yet to go in the oven. Many have not even been purchased at this point. And yet, the first big free agent, in some ways the biggest free agent, is off the board. Josh Naylor, that delightfully bowling ball shaped, high energy, expressive first baseman from the Seattle Mariners, is returning to the Pacific Northwest on a 5-year, $92.5 million contract. Naylor spent most of his career, I would say the bulk of it, in Cleveland, originally drafted by the Marlins, traded to the Padres, then to Cleveland, dealt to Arizona last winter, first half of the year in Arizona, sent to Seattle at the deadline, made quite an impact both culturally and on the field with his bat. He sticks around in Seattle for the long haul as the Mariners get going in free agency before everyone else has a chance to make their stuffing.
How about that? How about the Mariners of Seattle spending some dough? This is a not a small contract here. The largest free agent contract for a hitter since that Robinson Cano fella. Oh, he had an interesting weekend. Maybe we'll talk about that later this week. The Mariners were not shy about their intentions of bringing back Josh Naylor. Essentially, this honestly extends back even during the season. Of course, the fans have been very adamant that he needed to stay. And I'll be honest, like, as I watched Josh Naylor's second half and into the postseason, and everyone's like, he's got to stay, he's got to stay. I was like, listen, Mariners are still playing. He's helping out. Who knows what happens in the offseason? Just enjoy any rental you have to qualify and just enjoy it while it's lasting. And yet, when you talk to the people around the team and when you just listen to Josh Naylor talk about his experience, yes, you hear it often. Oh, I love it here. This is so great. This really did seem to reach another level. And yes, a lot of that had to do with how well he was playing, how well the team was playing, and it all just seemed to click. But it seemed genuine. And I think when you think about Josh Naylor's career, you kind of flew through it there, understandably. This dude was traded four times before turning 28, and before turning 30. Part of this contract is a no trade clause. That is not a small thing for a player that plays for the team that is managed by Jerry DiPoto. But also, you can imagine for Josh Naylor, he just wanted to go somewhere and be somewhere that appreciates him for what he's about and what he brings on and off the field. And I think even in a few months, the Mariners absolutely felt that. And we can talk about whether this is an underpay, like what is it? But I think in that sense, all of this is a totally logical outcome for both sides. I think it's a pretty good match.
Totally agree. As far as the contract terms are concerned, I would say 92.5 is a bigger number than I expected. But we get to that figure because of the fifth year, right? I think most predictions, prognostications had Naylor pegged at 4 years. What the Mariners do here is by giving him that fifth year, they bump the AAV, the average annual value, down to what is only $18.5 million, which considering, the QO is 22 and a half, it doesn't feel like a big number. Feels relatively manageable, something that the Mariners can handle.
Yeah, no deferrals in this. And I think, too, Josh Naylor just turned, or I think is about to turn 29, right? Or turns 29 in May, I think. And so this isn't giving a 5-year deal to a guy that's going to be 36, 37 by the end of it. Now, there's reasons you could look at Josh Naylor's profile and be like, okay, how well is this guy that's he's a big dude and he's already a first baseman? What is this going to look like at the back of his contract? But you're not really worried about that, because right now, this is why that 5th year is so important, lowering that AAV. If you're giving yourself more room to do more stuff right now, whether that's acquiring via trade, whether that's going out and adding more free agents, the present is what matters. 2026 is what matters for the team that came within one game of making the World Series for the first time ever. And I think the other thing that makes Josh Naylor such a good fit is this is the one position where you didn't really know what the plan was for Seattle. You can look around the infield, whether it's second base, whether it's third base, and we'll say, okay, are they going to bring back Polanco? Are they going to bring back Gino? Polanco seems more likely than Gino. I'm not super confident that Polanco is going to happen, but maybe it does. First base, there was not an obvious plan in the short term or even the long term. When you look at their prospects, they have a bunch of infield prospects, outfield prospects, where you can kind of see it shaking out. First base was just not something that they'd figured out. Now they have that figured out. And I think that Josh Naylor, with the kind of hitter that he is, and we've talked about this over the last few months, like, he's not really what he looks like. Yes, he's capable of hitting the ball over the fence, but the profile here is different than the Pete Alonso, right? And when you compare those, and we'll bring Pete into this conversation too, I think the other to say is, okay, well, wow, they were able to get this done. Yes, the match worked out. Well, Josh Naylor could have just gone to free agency and played it out and tried to max out the money, tried to get the Mets involved, tried to get the Red Sox involved. Like, there are other teams that need first basemen that he could have tried to ratchet up the price as much as possible and played out the free agency as much as possible. Clearly, him and the Mariners prioritized getting something done at a deal, which is, I think, very, very reasonable for both sides. I bring that all up just because Josh Naylor, when you do compare him to the other options, and Pete Alonso most particularly, we just spent a whole year last year debating the value of free agent first baseman with Pete, with Christian Walker, who ended up with much shorter deals. Now they're much older. Naylor versus Alonso is an interesting comparison, and it will be moving forward. He's a couple years younger. He's left-handed. He's definitely a better defender. Across the line, if you look at the OBP and even the slugging percentage over the last few years, it's not that different. Pete just has a way more home runs, right? Way, way, way more home runs. And obviously the durability with Pete is unmatched. Not that Naylor's been very injured. So that is not really something we were comparing before, but now that Naylor gets a contract of over $90 million, and we know that Pete struggled to get anything close to that last year, and now he's a year older, it will be interesting to see how this impacts Pete, if it does at all.
I think it shows us the value of age, which, we know, but being 28, which Naylor is for another, couple weeks, versus Pete being on the other side of 30. I mean, that's a significant difference. And I think Pete's age will be a narrative for him. I do think the biggest difference for Pete this year is going to be no QO, where he doesn't have that attached to him. The same thing was true with Naylor, considering he was traded during the season. Now he ends up going back to the Mariners anyway, so that's not really a character. I'm curious to hear from you. Like, you mentioned Naylor's profile being different than Pete's, right? It is, especially in today's game, probably the first baseman whose profile is most driven by batting average and on base compared to slug. Do you think how do you expect that over the long haul to play at T-Mobile Park, which has historically been a place that keeps offense down?
Yeah, so I actually want to bring this more back to where he fits with Seattle as much as comparing to Pete. Just to kind of tie the bow up on the age point, Pete turns 31 next month. Naylor doesn't turn 29 until next June, actually. So there's a pretty substantial difference there. But I think it's not as much about comparing with Pete. It's more about comparing him to the rest of the Mariners lineup. And I think that this is really where you saw, and by the end, it ended up kind of devolving into more of a one-dimensional group. But Naylor was the exception. Like all the way to the very, very end of the Mariners run, Naylor was bringing something that the rest of the Mariners lineup really didn't. And that was batting average. And yes, they had cut down the strikeouts this year, even before Naylor showed up. But that left-handed component that can put the ball in play, he's not necessarily drawing a ton of walks, but have a strikeout rate of, 13% this year, 14%. And have enough raw power to be threatening. It's not obviously not a Luis Arraez situation where it's like, yeah, sure, I'll throw it over the plate because what are you going to do with it? Like, no, Josh Naylor will make you pay.
He popped 20.
He popped 20. We know the stolen bases were kind of a fun subplot with him too. But I think that it's more about just like the kind of hitter, what he is giving you, the kind of hitter that you're having to deal with when you're game planning for a team, because there are a lot of teams where it's like it's one note. It's a lot of sluggers, right? I know this has been a discourse about the Yankees in a lot of respects, but it's like, okay, well, you get to this time of year, if you just have a bunch of guys that are swinging for the fences, even if they're some of the best hitters in the world, it's a little bit easier to neutralize them. When you add in someone like Naylor, that's also why he fits in with a lineup with a Julio, with a Randy, with a Cal Raleigh, where you're going to have elevated swing and miss. I think he really balanced it out in a real way, especially left-handed, and someone who's good. So to your point, how is it going to fit in T-Mobile Park? I mean, he was unbelievable. He had like the best home OPS that we've seen in a sizable sample for guys in years. So is that going to continue for the duration of his contract? I'm going to guess no, just because that's what the park factor is, a much stronger historical indicator than Josh Naylor's awesome 2 months. But clearly he's a level of comfortable there that guys just haven't been. And so that has to give the Mariners a level of confidence as well. So I think all of those things combined to make him the obvious guy to make sure they brought back. And while it should not conclude their offseason, I think that Mariners fans are right to be pretty excited about him sticking around.
The stolen bases, I just want to touch on that for a second. So Josh Naylor is in the 3rd percentile for sprint speed. Okay. 3rd percentile. Like, he is one of the slowest players in the league. And he swiped 30 bags this year. That is unbelievable. Now, that is both opportunistic. I would imagine if you went through all those steals, not all of them were like Dave Roberts in the ALCS. The world knows he's going, right? No. Do I think that his stolen bases meaningfully helped his market? Not really. I do think, however, it is an indication that Josh Naylor is a smart ball player.
Yes.
And that it is the type of behavior that if I was a team would make me feel more comfortable about a player adapting to their environment as they age. Now, a lot more goes into that, and the Mariners and other teams have more information on players than we do. But like, from where we sit, it is a data point to me. Not because I think he's going to steal 40 next year, right? But because I think that he is thinking about baseball critically all the time. And his that shtick of stealing bags, it's, a lot has happened since then. Game 5 of the ALDS, remember that? Kind of a wonky one, 15 innings. The Mariners score the first run of that ball game in the bottom of the 2nd. He doubles, and with 1 out, steals 3rd base and scores on a sac fly. And in October, I mean, that's a big, big deal. As far as what I think this means for the market, I think this is only good news for Pete, just because it pushes the floor up. I don't think that it means a ton, because the Naylor situation with the Mariners, him really wanting to go back there and them really wanting him back, feels like a bit of an outlier and is going to be difficult for either teams or agents to bring up in negotiations. We see this every year, right? Like, there's always a couple deals that don't fit within the accepted economic framework of the winter. Like Shane Bieber accepting the deal to go back to Toronto is both different and similar in that regard. And then lastly, for the Mariners, I don't expect another enormous move from them. This is a significant financial commitment. I'm happy that they went out and did it, but they're not going to be in the Kyle Tucker swimming pool. They never were. I don't think that they'll spend money on starting pitching, nor really should they. The one area where I would be compelled to see them, commit a little bit of money, and I'm curious for your thoughts here, then we'll take a break, is the reliever market. Do you think that, now on one hand, like their ability to develop pitching for the last 5 years would make it seem like they can just, concoct a good pitcher out of the ether, and they have done that many times. Do you think that they'll make calls and be interested in like bring back Diaz? Oh, that would be so good. Wow. Wow. Sorry, that just popped into my head.
I don't see that. I thought about that earlier, but no, I don't think they're at that level. But this was my biggest critique of them at the deadline last year, amidst all the positivity around Naylor and Gino, which was obviously justified. We know how important both of those guys were. By the end of the year, and even in the second half, and this is true for the last couple of years, like they've been a couple arms short. They've leaned on their top guys so much. And yeah, it's not as simple as, well, you used Pizzardo one too many times. There's a lot of things that went into that decision that we don't have to rehash. But truly, those guys just get worked like crazy. And I just feel like my argument at the deadline was you can never look at a deadline and be like, well, there's no relievers available. It's like, and in this case, not that I'm really someone that's like, you need to go spend money on relievers. There are so many out there this year, and I'm not even, once you even get past the top of the market with Diaz and Williams and Suarez, whatever, there's just so many compelling guys in that 1 to 2 year range that I think could make this unit a legitimate strength. Whereas this past year, it was a strength under the perfect circumstances, but the depth beyond it was just not there. And so, honestly, the weakness was more on the left side of things in terms of the bullpen. There's not as many of those options out there in free agency, but I expect them to. I mean, Hollander's been very open about it. Like he knows, like we gotta make this unit a little deeper. And so, while I don't think a Diaz reunion or anything at the top is likely, if they do make one more, 10 million plus AAV move, maybe it is that instead of bringing back Polanco. Again, Gino, I don't think is an option. I think Polanco is very much still in play. We'll see. We'll see what else could kind of come to be. So yeah.
Last thing, which I just realized, Jeff Passan this morning over at ESPN, writing that the Pittsburgh Pirates were very interested in Josh Naylor. Now, this does reek a little bit of we tried. There's some we tried, raise the banner energy here. But Jeff writes, the largest free agent contract the Pirates have ever handed out was more than a decade ago, 3 years, $39 million to Francisco Liriano. Yet they were primed to spend more than twice that on Josh Naylor before he re-upped with Seattle for 5 years and $92.5 million. Easy to say. We'll talk about all the teams here in a second. I'll believe it when I see it as it pertains to the Pittsburgh Pirates.
We're gonna talk. Right, we're gonna talk about where the Pirates fit into the free agency landscape here after the break. That does remind me, though, of another point I wanted to make about this. Another reason why Josh, and relevant to that reporting that you just shared, one of the other reasons why I think Josh Naylor is such a perfect fit is that he can just be a good hitter and do his thing, and he's not the guy. If he went to the Pirates, they would have been treating him like Freddie Freeman. They would have been like, please come save our franchise. And like, this is not a commentary on, but it's just like, that is not, I don't think that's what he wants or what he is capable of doing. And that's fine. Really good player. That's why he's so perfect. It's more than additive. That's like underselling it, but it's fine. You don't have to be the face of the franchise. You could just be a really good first baseman and do your thing. Cal Raleigh's got the face. Cal Raleigh and Julio, they got it covered. You're good. And so I think that's another reson why he fits so perfectly
Leo
there.
Rivas.
And yeah. And so anyway, so that is related to the point I was like, Pirates. I can see the Pirates' logic, but Josh Naylor could not save the Pirates' offense. Connor Griffin, though, maybe he can. More on that in spring training. All right, we're going to take a break. When we return, we are going to go around the league and kind of set the stage for free agency through the lens of our 30 Major League Baseball teams. We'll be right back on Baseball Barbacast.
And welcome back to Baseball Barbacast. So, to set up free agency, we're going to begin with the teams because the players have to be on teams in order to play. right? They can't just go out there and play. I've tried this. I've tried this, like pick me. Let me out there. That doesn't work. They got to be on teams. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go around the league and we're going to tier all 30 teams into 9 different groups. Now, this will flow loosely from how much we think they'll spend from top to bottom. There are different categories within that, and you'll understand as we go. But we will begin at the top of the spreadsheet with the Los Angeles Dodgers and the New York Mets in a category we'll refer to as funny money.
This could also, there's a lot of ways you could label all of these categories, and we encourage people to email us, baseballbarbacast@gmail.com. Give us some editorial notes on these. But the Dodgers and Mets have obviously separated themselves for different reasons in terms of what they are capable and willing to spend over the past half decade. We have one super, conglomerate, the Mark Walter-led Guggenheim Group, which just seems to have infinite pockets, essentially predicated on having the best team with the best players and a reach globally that extends far beyond what any of the other teams have right now, at least as it relates to the Japanese market. We know there are more Yankees hats in Europe than Dodgers hats. I realize that.
Well, just quickly on that.
Yeah.
This is a tangent that we don't need, but I'm going to do it. So who like the OG Guggenheim was Meyer Guggenheim, a Swiss Jew born in 1828, is the patriarch of the Guggenheim family. So perhaps the ultimate plan is to.
This was Meyer's vision.
That's exactly my point. I am laughing at the idea of Meyer Guggenheim, born in Lengau, Switzerland on February 1st, 1828, who made his money in the mining industry, sitting there and be like explaining to that guy like Roki Sasaki. It's
be like, listen, it's going to sound weird because he's never thrown a pitch in the major leagues before, but we're going to give him all
Meyer,
of the money.
Meyer, baseball barely exists. But trust me,
but one day
be there.
Your name and your name, I don't know how his name was presented in his time, but that G is just going to hit. That jersey badge is just going to carry serious weight. Anyway,
they'll
so
remember
Meyer Guggenheim's empire in Los Angeles. Then you have Steve. Steve over there in Queens has more money than all the other individuals who own baseball teams. And he would really like to see the Mets win the World Series. How he has gone about spending said money over the last half decade since he has owned the team has been fascinating because it has fluctuated up and down. Spending money wisely, spending money poorly, suddenly exercising restraint because David Stearns told him that Frankie Montas is a good idea. It has gone up and down, but the point is the Mets still have the most money. And if they want to start spending like if they want to spend more than everybody else, that is an option to them. Do I expect them to spend more money than last year when they gave Juan Soto all that money? Maybe not, but even if they don't, they could still spend more than everybody else. So that is why the Dodgers and Mets are in their own category above the rest of the league.
I would like to just touch on both of these teams for an extra half beat because they are going to be so relevant. I think part of what has amplified the conversation about the salary cap is that free agency now is less interesting than it used to be because only a certain number of teams can play in the deep end. And the Dodgers and the Mets are those two teams. They will be rumored on effectively every single free agent. Right? They have to be mentioned for every single free agent because, except for I guess the Dodgers are not going to sign Pete Alonso, right? Because where are they going to put him?
Sure.
But that is why they're at the top of the list and that's why they're so relevant. For the Dodgers, I'm interested in how evil do they get, right? They have now won 2 in a row. The lockout is approaching. We could be operating under a new financial system in, a year's time. Does that impact the way the Dodgers approach this winter, where they're like, this is our last chance to really go nut, and maybe Kyle Tucker's contract is grandfathered in. Let's get him on our roster. I could see that. As it pertains to the Mets, I'm most interested in which of the two guys do they bring back, Alonso and Diaz? And beyond that, how do they seek to supplement the roster? They have some money coming off the books, but if they try and keep Alonso and Diaz, it's less money than you think, right? Because that's included in the math there. And where are the obvious holes? Do they spend big on pitching? Do they think that young core of arms is going to come up and save the day? Do they call on Dylan Cease, right? I'm fascinated to see how the Mets approach. They're one of the most interesting teams this winter for me.
Yeah, the other thing that separates these two teams, because we're about to talk about some other teams that have a lot of money and are willing to spend it, is these are the two teams that have looked at the luxury tax rules and said, that's nice. We're not concerned about that. We're just going to blast past it and pay whatever taxes we need to. Sure, maybe we do a little deferral here, deferral there to help out some of the money stuff, but the rules that have been in place to punish the teams that are spending too much money, while they have scared off some of these other teams that we're about to talk about, they have not scared off the Dodgers or Mets really in any meaningful way in the recent years. Okay, so that's two teams down, 28 to go. Our next tier was so brilliantly named, courtesy of my lovely co-host Jake Mintz, the rich men north of Richmond. This is 3 teams: the Yankees, the Phillies, and the Blue Jays. 3 very different situations going into this offseason, of course, but 3 teams that through a variety of contracts, extensions, and owner behavior have exhibited the next level of, oh yeah, we got money and we are willing to spend it. Obviously, Toronto they just did it to extend Vlad Jr. They're coming off a massive postseason run, windfall financially, and just like the vibe of the team. They are Toronto. They are a big market. They have plenty of money. They can spend it. And they have been trying in free agency. They haven't obviously succeeded in spending all the money recently, but they were willing to give Shohei $700 million, and they were willing to give Juan Soto a lot of money. So that's the Blue Jays. Yankees, you can say, oh, it's not like old times. Listen, they're still spending a lot of money. And while they did not ultimately get Juan Soto, and they did not ultimately get Yoshinobu Yamamoto, and so on, let's not pretend like the Yankees are not still capable of spending more than, again, everybody but the Dodgers and Mets. And maybe even outspend the Dodgers and Mets in some circumstances. And then the Phillies, who have an owner in John Middleton who has been saying all the things of, I don't care what the rules are, I will spend what it takes to get the championship, and has mostly acted upon that. However, because of the state of the roster and kind of the direction of their franchise, they arrive at an interesting point here where Schwarber is, of course, the top priority, Real Muto as well. Is there another move? Is there a move on top of that other than just keeping this group together? Is it a Kyle Tucker, right?
Yeah.
I mean, sure. That could be a fit. Is it adding another pitcher? Who knows? So these 3 teams we believe belong together.
Phillies, the question is, right, do they shake it up? Do they bring those guys back? Do they do both? The Blue Jays, the question is, now that they have, ascended to the main stage, with a deep postseason run, can that help them attract big names in free agency? Do they act like a behemoth? And then the Yankees are what an interesting team, man. For the Yankees, it's like, one, do they bring Bellinger back? And then how do they supplement the loss of Trent Grisham, because it doesn't feel like he's coming back? And you can't plan, even if you bring Trent Grisham back, I don't think you could plan for him to have that offensive season again. You know what I mean? So I think you do need to supplement that group a little bit. And then, we've heard some rumors already that they're interested in the starting pitching market, which is super compelling, because they are they have long-term commitments out to Rodon, Fried, and Cole already, and a couple of young arms coming up. I know Rodon and Cole are going to miss the start of the season. Clark Schmidt is going to be out for a while, so they need guys. But it's are they going to go get a big name? Or are they going to try and spend all that money on the reliever side of things?
Let Schlittler cook. Come on now. What more does a guy got to do? I will say that the Yankees, it's so interesting because last year it's like, oh my God, how do they pivot from Soto? They did it pretty well. Obviously, the season didn't end very well, but if you're just looking at what they did to replace him, they sure could have used Juan Soto in the postseason. Anyway, the Yankees are the Yankees. We will spend plenty of time talking about them. Let's move on to our next tier. This tier is called Have Employed or Do Employ Rafael Devers. That is the Red Sox and the
just
Giants.
2 teams.
And I believe...
Yeah, it's
just 2 teams.
Just 2 teams.
I believe it's funny because I remember a year ago, we kind of lumped the Red Sox and Giants together also because they had been stuck in the middle. They had money, but have spent it weirdly or have not quite been willing to spend as much. But now we're putting them together because Rafael Devers and that trade says a lot about both of these teams. Because if you're willing to trade away Rafael Devers and the $300 million he's owed or whatever, however much was still owed to him, you're like, okay, well, we're getting that off the books so we can go do other stuff. Part of that was to have Alex Bregman, who's now a free agent and maybe not coming back. And then if you're the Giants and you're like, we're getting Rafael Devers, I mean, that is a statement. That is this is a guy we're gonna take on that contract. We're willing to spend on other teams' players, to bring them in. But you could, unlike the Red Sox, who made the postseason, the Giants ended up right back where they were when the season started, in the middle, just magnetically tethered to 500 or near it. But now they have Tony Vitello. Buster Posey is continuing on his journey to bring the Giants back to glory. And what does that look like? The Red Sox, from a roster standpoint and a free agency standpoint, I think is more compelling because of the guys they need to try and keep. And the Giants, it's just like, what are you going to do to move this forward? What does that look like? Because yes, Tony Vitello is going to be a big part of that story for sure. And we look forward to covering it.
But
there's
he doesn't
still parts
play
of this
baseball.
roster where it's just like, you got to have more good baseball players. Clearly, they have not had enough good baseball players recently. So what does that look like? Is that a Murakami? Yeah. Is that a Dylan Cease or Framber Valdez? Kyle Tucker could fit there. Like, the Giants kind of need everything. And so they could be, I expect them to be in the rumors for a lot of these things. But which of those players does Buster Posey want? Because you kind of got to be a Buster Posey guy for him to want to give you all the money. That turned out to be Matt Chapman. Apparently, it also turned out to be Rafael Devers in kind of a funny way. But what happens from here? I think both of these teams are just so interesting.
Both of these teams also have a no doubt ace. Like, an arm
but could use another.
Exactly correct. They have a no doubt ace, but beyond that, the staff needs a sidekick, right?
Yeah.
No shade to Robbie Ray and no shade to a little bit of shade to Brian Bayo.
Yeah.
But
that's an interesting one. I think I'd rather have Robbie Ray versus Bayo is like a random
like for
comparison.
Next year.
But either
I'd rather
way,
have Robbie Ray.
Yeah.
No shade to Kai Wei Tang and Trevor McDonald, who are currently on the roster resource page for the Giants.
I sat on a plane next to Trevor McDonald once, so that's worth something for him.
Oh, actually, Jordan, Trevor McDonald sat on a plane next to you, my dude. Sat on a plane next to you. Okay, we have now gone through 7 teams. Here are 6 more. I'm calling this category "You Have Spent," but where are you? Padres, Rangers, Astros, Braves, Cubs, and Angels. These clubs have handed out huge commitments to big-time players, whether it be Tatis, Corey Seager, all the extended Braves, Anthony Rendon once upon a time, right? But we, for various reasons, are confused and intrigued about where these teams are at. I'll take the first 3. The Padres ownership situation continues to cloud their ability to invest. They do not have a lot of money coming off the books this winter. I think their payroll is staying pretty static relatively. And so where they try and upgrade, or if they're just going to let payroll slide down as they try and sell the team, potentially storyline to watch. The Rangers, after winning the World Series, 2 straight years of walking on a treadmill and going nowhere. New skipper, Skip. He will certainly change some things. They had one of the best pitching staffs in baseball last year. Do they try and upgrade on offense by adding a big bat? Or do they just try and like extend Wyatt Langford? TBD. And then the Astros. I don't know, man. What are the Astros at this point? Their reign of October participation ended this year. They spent a little money last winter on Christian Walker, but they're going to have to either bring back, which it doesn't feel like they will, or replace Framber Valdez, who's been an incredibly consistent member of that team now for a long time.
I mean, they took on the Carlos Correa contract, which is absurd.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
That's the money that they just spent, and why I don't think they're really going to do anything that dramatic this winter, but they probably should because they just missed the postseason for the first time forever. One thing on the Padres is, I mean, they do have money coming off, right? Cease and Arise and O'Hearn, Suarez, but a sneaky, bizarre contract that was not talked about enough is Nick Pivetta, who last year or this year was only making $2 million, and the rest of it was backloaded. So his contract jumps up to $20 million this year, which Nick Pivetta is very good. Like, it's not that he doesn't deserve that, but that kind of helps offset some of the losses, some of the guys they left, and then they have all these other massive contracts, right? They're paying you Darvish, who's not going to pitch, and they paying Tatis and Bogarts $25 million, and Machado $25 million, and Cronenworth $13 million. So the point is yeah, they probably don't have a lot of flexibility, even though they are losing some key players. So that puts them in a pretty tough spot. The only other team to mention here, Braves. I don't know what to do with them. The Cubs are weird because they've really only given out one big contract, and that was Dansby Swanson, at least recently. Suzuki here and there, some pitchers, but like I don't know. All these teams have given us reasons to doubt, as you mentioned. Like, honestly, of these 6 teams, who do you think is most likely to like give out $100 million contract? I think
it's the Rangers.
I don't know. See, I don't think so, the way that they're talking about it. I think that, yes, historically and where their roster is and them wanting to get back into it, but some of the discourse around that team is that they're still, not in the mood to start spending again. So I see why you say that.
I mean, if you're talking money off the books,
so hard to read.
It has to be the Cubs, just right. Like,
it has to be the Cubs, right?
They Cubs have a good amount of dough.
In theory, have the most. Yeah, I was gonna say the Cubs are still my answer, even though the way they've acted has been so frustrating. But I think it's still the Cubs. Braves, I have not quite wrapped my mind around what the Braves are right now.
Well,
so we'll come back.
The thing with Angels, the Cubs, just quickly, The thing with the Cubs is, remember, so Jed Hoyer, their president of baseball operations, he got an extension a couple days before the trade deadline. And so that just tells me that ownership is content with the status quo. They are content with the current approach to roster building that Hoyer has overseen. And because of that, I would be surprised at this point to see them zag significantly from how they have gotten here. Now, that is disappointing. This team should be a real behemoth with the amount of money they bring in. And until they start acting that way, they will be here grouped together with the Padres, Astros, Braves, Rangers, Angels. Next group, 6 more teams, which we will call Why Don't You Just Meet Me in the Middle? Maybe one of my favorite pop songs of all time. Hot take. This is the D-backs, the Mariners, the Tigers, the Royals, the Orioles, and the Rockies. Okay. These are teams that are at various times have been small market or have acted small market, but at various times have shown a willingness to spend. They are at very different points. These clubs, 5 of them actually are in relatively similar points where they're trying to contend, and one team is the Rockies. But we feel like the Rockies had to be grouped here because if Paul DePodesta went out and signed Dylan Cease, I would be both surprised and I would be like, that's the Rockies.
And they have their payroll somehow, some way has generally stayed around the middle. I wouldn't be surprised if this is maybe the year that starts to change, but they are certainly unpredictable enough that we will group them in here instead of the full-blown bottom feeders. If you believe they belong at the bottom, that is also fine. But these other 5 teams are like, okay, so the Mariners just signed Josh Naylor, so that's a good start for them. But if that's the only thing that they do, their payroll is still going to be right around the middle, right? We still haven't seen them actually stretch and push it. Now you would think would be the time that it gets higher than we've seen it in a long time, and they have to go prove that they are willing to do that. The Naylor move is a good start. We'll see. The Diamondbacks have been probably more aggressive than any of these other teams, at least since the Tigers stopped spending. I mean, they just gave Corbin Burns $200 million last year. Like, that's a huge deal. They've given out money to Bumgarner and Erod, and they've signed some pretty big extensions for their own guys, for Corbin Carroll and Ketel Marte. Like, clearly Ken Kendrick's willing to flash some cash. That's another team that's in kind of a weird space. They clearly still have enough, especially on the offensive side, even after all those trades, a championship core of offense. I feel fine saying that.
Yes.
Like, this is a fantastic group of offensive players. And the pitching has just been so much of a mess. And what's most compelling now is the familiar faces are now gone or might be gone, right? Maybe Gallen sticks around, maybe Merrill Kelly. I know they already traded him. But now we're kind of moving into it's just like, okay, listen, you got to find a way to get outs. And I don't know if those players are already on the team or not, or if it involves infrastructure, but that's the path to the Diamondbacks competing is finding ways to get outs. Does that mean that they spend on a Dylan Cease or on a Fromber? Maybe. Again, obviously they got burned by it in some respect last year with Burns, so maybe they don't have the appetite for that. But they've shown a willingness to do it, so they belong here. And then the Tigers and Royals, the Tigers have a history in the past, but a much distant past of the previous Ilitch being willing to spend. Current Ilitch, not so much, but they are a team that has been in the postseason now 2 years in a row, and they belong. And the Royals and Orioles, we can kind of lump together because last year felt like this big step forward, and then this year was... The Royals were not embarrassing, but they did not feel like a real threat at any point, and the Orioles were obviously a disaster. So those teams would have reasons to think like, okay, now's the time to go. We have money coming off. We have ownership that seems to be exhibiting, saying we're entering a championship window, but none of them have actually acted like it quite yet. Hilariously, the Royals have more than Detroit and Baltimore to this point.
Yeah. Like quickly on the Orioles. So last winter, they go and give out a handful of 1-year deals, right? It was all 1-year deals except for Tyler O'Neill.
Oh,
O'Neill.
Yeah. Yikes.
They were hoping was going to be a 1-year deal, but he was bad and opted in to his contract.
Yeah.
But the rest of those dudes like Kyle Gibson and, Tomiyuki Sagano and Andrew Kitcher, like it did not go well. Right? It did not go well.
Gary Sanchez.
Gary Sanchez. They fell flat on their face. Now, Mike Elias, their president of baseball operations, has been forthright that, hey, last year was a failure and we need to do better. What does that look like? Do they commit big money to a big pitcher? They need pitching help. Do they go and do it? Their owner, David Rubenstein, I mean, he is a rich boy. Like, he is north of Richmond. Like he's the guy that guy is singing about in the song. He has a Magna Carta for fun. Does he spend some of that money on an arm? I would be surprised if they sign a player with a QO attached. Just because of how, huggy, is that a word? How attached they have been to their own draft picks over the Elias tenure, right? And I don't think they would be willing to let go of that even for the right player, even if the money is budgeted.
I'm not saying you're wrong, but then Fromber QO, Cease QO, Ranger Suarez QO, Michael King QO, Zach Gallen QO, Imanaga QO. Imai is the interesting one, right? Now that would be Imai's like, man, Sagano looks like he was having a great time. I gotta go see what it's all. Yeah, that looks like fun. So sure. I mean, give him enough money, he'll probably sign with you. But they would have to, they would have to accept. Mike Elias would have to be like, okay, fine, I'll only have, only a couple comp picks this year instead of, because they're going to have these other competitive balance picks anyway.
That's the thing. That's the thing.
They've drafted so many picks recently. Like, you could give one up. Or hold on, but this is also relevant. I know we're focused on free agency here. Or you finally make, now I say finally, they traded for Corbin Burns. That's the other option, is you go trade for Freddie Peralta, which would be very funny. You go trade for Mackenzie Gore. Little beltway swap there, right? Like, you can try. Now, your farm system is not as sexy as it was a year ago, let's be honest. But there's still a lot of intriguing pieces, certainly with all the guys they just drafted. That is another way. And honestly, I think that is still more likely than them blowing Dylan Cease away with $150 million. I would love to be wrong, because it would be nice to see Rubenstein start spending. But I don't know. It still kind of smells like a trade's more likely. Sandy.
Our next category, right. Sandy.
Yeah.
Our next category, which is a perfect transition, 3 teams that we will call too smart to spend. Now, we're saying that tongue-in-cheek, to be clear. But that is the Milwaukee Brewers, the Tampa Bay Rays, and the Cleveland Guardians. 3 teams that don't spend a lot of money. Now, the Brewers do spend a little bit more than these other 2. We should give them some credit there. But they have shown a track record of regular season consistency and competence. They are, all 3 of them in various ways are believed and considered like the standards in terms of player development, in terms of getting the most out of their players. These are smart teams. Are they too smart to spend? That is the question.
Yeah, and obviously all coming off very different seasons. The Rays, kind of a lost year, having to play away from the Trop. The Guardians, an incredible season, but also one that was derailed by things out of their control. And then the Brewers had the best record in baseball. So they're all in very different spots, but they have earned both the benefit of the doubt and also kind of the collective frustration of like, hey, you're doing a lot of these other things really well. What if you just spent some more money on like really good baseball players? And they're like, why would we do that? We keep winning anyway. And you're like, okay, yeah, true, but still, you still want them to do it. So I don't really know what that means for these 3, but yeah.
So there are people who work for these teams that listen to our show, right? And we like them and we think they're smart and good at their jobs. And here's what I struggle with when evaluating like these teams. Did members of the Brewers and Guardians front office watch the playoffs and watch their offenses and think, we can win a World Series with this? Like, there were just so many outs there embedded in the lineups. Whereas like, this is not, you said about the Diamondbacks, right? Like, that's a championship core. You could put that team in October and they could win you a World Series. Is that the case with these teams? Now, you have needle moving guys like Jose Ramirez is amazing. And like, maybe Jackson Chourio becomes that. And there are, Contreras and I get it. But I was watching those teams play in October and they just didn't look capable of winning a World Series. And maybe you can create that in-house. Maybe you can't. And it's like, could you imagine if either of these teams just had one more bat? Like, oh,
well,
man.
And listen, these teams, Milwaukee in particular, they're looking at their farm and the Jesus Mates and so on. They're saying, "No, we got it." Cleveland, maybe same thing. Okay, we got Bazzana coming, we got DeLauder. Like, they're gonna believe that they have their own guys that can become this. But no, I agree with your big picture point there. All right, Jake, we have 8 more teams. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, 8 more teams, including a playoff team. We'll be right back on Baseball Barbacast. Welcome back to Baseball Barbacast. We have 8 more teams to talk about. And let's begin with one that was in the postseason this year. The Cincinnati Reds get their own tier. This tier is called the Reds. Jake, I don't know what to do with this team. We kind of said that for the entirety of the regular season. They went to Los Angeles and got promptly whooped by the eventual champs. That they can at least take solace in that, They're like, well,
it was a scrimmage.
There was all the other teams spent, all the other teams that got the bye spent their week inter-squatting. The Dodgers just did it against the Reds. All right. Now we're mostly done being disrespectful. Here's the thing. There are things to like on this Reds roster, obviously, still. They deserve credit for playing well enough to make the postseason when the Mets did not. That is a thing that happened. That is very funny. The Reds are a team, honestly, it's not quite the Rockies, but they are the team pretty consistently that is making moves where I'm just like, all right, okay, all right. Sometimes I like them, sometimes I don't.
Sometimes it's Jeimer Candelario.
Yeah, right. Sometimes it obviously goes horribly wrong. They've had some huge misses, right? And then they've had some nice moves that have helped them. Obviously, they have some real young talent, especially on the mound. There's some pitching that looks like, okay, we got something here. Same kind of thing, though. Does this lineup resemble anything close to something that can compete once you actually get to the postseason? And the answer was obviously not against the Dodgers, but I think even would have been the case had they gotten the full series against another team. Now, listen,
they did.
Ellie is a huge part of this. They did, yes. In those two, are we talking about those two games? Yes, sure.
Yeah,
they scored some runs, but if you look at the totality of the season, they were below average in runs per game. They had a 90 OPS plus, which was 25th. Not an offense that is particularly exciting. Now, that said, are they going to sign Kyle Tucker? I don't think so. So is there a hitter that they can sign that isn't Jeimer Candelario disaster that can elevate this group? They maybe would have made sense for Josh Naylor, right? That could have been maybe a fit there. I don't know if they were interested there. They at least have more good things going on that you can be like, maybe you are just a couple players away. I think that's maybe the most complimentary way I can phrase the Reds situation, but also maybe they don't want to spend any money because they're the Reds, and that also happens often. So because they made the postseason, we have to acknowledge them as a different group than some of these other teams we're about to talk about that are either small markets or like teams that aren't always spending. But I don't know. I don't know what to do with this team.
I never will. Next group, 3 more teams, wrong place, wrong time. The Minnesota Twins, the St. Louis Cardinals, and the Washington Nationals. The Cardinals and the Twins, at various points in their histories, have spent real money. Like real money. They won't do that this winter. Both are embarking upon a new era of baseball under new leadership. Chaim Bloom in St. Louis and Paul Poboni, who I learned yesterday people call T-Bone.
Yeah. I'm not giving up on Poboni. I'm still calling him that.
Okay.
I get it.
Neither of those teams are going to spend significantly. They're there to in Washington and in St. Louis, 2 of the 3 places that I've ever lived, both are going to really prioritize their systems, refurbishing the structure of the organization, emphasizing player development. There's not going to be a whole lot of sexy stuff at the big league level this year. There'll probably be some trades of veteran players away for prospects. And as for that reason, anything beyond a 1-year deal would surprise me. The Twins are I honestly think could just be in the next group, which is broke boys.
Yeah. The Twins are straddling that. Obviously, they had probably one of the more difficult. You could argue that if you're that fan bases that were down bad the most in 2025, I think they might be number 1 if you're really considering the expectations coming into the year, the tear down at the deadline, the thinking that they're selling the team and then not selling the team, and then now just kind of floating into, you hire Derek Shelton, which is like, great, we like Shelty, but it's not like that's some bold new venture that inspires this grand new era of baseball. There are still some good players here, but why do we think that what have they done recently that tells us that they're about to start making a run at a World Series? So maybe they do belong at the bottom with the final 4 teams: the Marlins, the White Sox, the Pirates, and A's. Now, obviously, with the case of the A's with Luis Severino last year, with the Pirates apparently wanting to give Josh Naylor a bunch of money, with the Marlins getting their MLB trade rumors headline, oh, Marlins willing to spend a little more. Perhaps, and then the White Sox, who are just still at the bottom of their rebuild, and understand that, I think, more than these other teams.
Yeah.
Maybe one of these comes out and surprises. And this is kind of why we're doing this exercise. This is why we're setting up free agency this way, because until they prove us wrong, the way that the A's sort of did last year with Severino to some degree, we have to expect them to not spend money. That is what our logic and brain and history tells us, is that they are not going to spend real money in free agency. So if they want to change that, then we'll talk about it. But until then, they belong.
Over under 2.5 multi-year deals given out by this quartet. Okay. Multi-year deals. Marlins, White Sox, Pirates, A's. Okay. 2.5.
I'll say over, because that's a really low number for 4 teams, and we could just see some weird 2-year reliever. But like, honestly, if you made it 3 years, I would go under. You know what I mean? Like multi-year, I think you could see.
Oh, 3 years.
No, I'm saying a 3-year deal or over is hard to imagine, and I would just love to be wrong. I would love to be wrong. And then, by the way, throw the Twins in there too. Throw the Cardinals and Nationals into that, right? Like, that is an interesting over-under of how many of these teams are willing to go multiple years, because that's what you have to prove. That's what you have to go be willing to do. Well, that is what the Royals have done. You know,
the Royals were here.
It's like, you're all capable, right? The Royals were here not that long ago. You can just decide, hey, we're going to do it. We're going to go sign Seth Lugo, or we're going to go sign Michael Wacha. Yeah.
I think what's important about this group this season is that 3 of these teams at the very bottom are entering 2026 with legitimate dreams of a playoff spot. Like, I think the Marlins, Pirates, and A's internally all believe that they can get a wild card. Now, is that true? Is that rational? Is that reasonable? Is a different conversation, right? But based upon the seasons they had, and the players they have at the big league level and the young talent, I think that if things break right, they have like a 20% chance of making the playoffs. And so I'm going to be curious to see, do they act that way, right? Do they try and supplement what they have through free agency or trade in order to make that happen? Like, if the Marlins go out and they sign a real bat, it could meaningfully change the way that you think about them.
Yeah. 3 very different things, right? Marlins were just not that bad last year, so you're working from a higher floor. Sure. The Pirates have pitching that you're like, yep, that's really good. And the A's have a lineup that you're like, yep, that's really good. But it's just so bad on the other side of the ball for both those teams. And the Marlins still, I think, are kind of weak across the board. But prove us wrong. Prove us wrong. All right, Jake. We've gone over an hour, but we still have more to talk about. And we're only going 2 shows a week in the postseason, in the offseason, which means we're going to stretch our legs a little bit and keep on yapping. So we've talked about the teams. Now let's talk about some of the players. A lot of these conversations are going to get more in depth as the offseason drags on and players linger into January and February, and we can like really dig in on like, why is Dylan Cease unsigned, or why has nobody paid Michael King? So we're going to kind of keep it big picture here for now, but we're going to turn our attention to the players and give you 5 big player questions before we get out of here today. And let's begin with a very simple one at the top, and that is Kyle Tucker going to get $400 million? What do you think? Yes or no? And then we can move on.
Okay, so would I give him $400 million? No. Because I don't have that. I'm not that liquid right now. No. Nor solid. Does he go over 400 million? I'm going to say no. I think that his season was concerning because of what hampered him, right? Like lower body stuff, which he had, like the hand thing was bad, right? and he missed some time. But then like he had it was like a leg thing, right? Down the stretch.
Calf, yeah.
I don't know, man. I know he's been so consistent when he's played, but I just don't. There are real concerns about how much he's going to be able to stay on the field and how he ages. And I think that combination makes him far from a no doubt take all my money guy. And I think it ends just under 400 million.
I am going to say it ends slightly above, but it is going to totally depend on how quickly his possible landing spots get addressed. Because you're going to get to a point where there's just not that many teams that have that kind of money that are even remotely willing.
Yeah.
Does not help that the Mets are like clearly don't make any sense for him. And so that's just one team. When you're talking about a short list of teams, when you already are eliminating one. And Dodgers, Yankees, Phillies, like, okay, as long as those are out there, like if all you need is two of those teams to start getting desperate and we start pushing it up. So I'm not. It's a good reminder. I don't think it's quickly. I feel very good. We're not getting to 500, which I know. 6 months ago, people were like, "Oh, he's easily getting 500." If Vlad Jr. is getting 500, of course, Kyle Tucker's getting 500. I don't think he's getting 500. I think 400 is. I think 400 is still going to happen.
It's also a good reminder. Last year, part of the reason the Soto number got so outrageous is because of how many teams were interested and involved, and like were actually trying there. I mean, in the end, it was 4 teams. It was Blue Jays.
Yeah.
It was Mets, Yankees, and Red Sox, right? That pushes the overall number up.
Yep. So I'll go over. But again, it's back to the thing when we had BNS on, like, our owner's going to get amped about Kyle Tucker. We're going to find out. All right, let's turn our focus to the pitching. We have our top 50 free agents. You can read them on Yahoo, so you can go see how we ended up ranking them. But I'm writing about Dylan Cease this week, and I keep going back and forth on him. I've been a Cease fan for a long time. We ranked them on our rankings, the top pitchers, which is a clear top 3 we assumed, which was Framber Valdez, Dylan Cease, and Ranger Suarez. I believe we ranked them Framber, Cease, Ranger on our top 50.
Nope.
Oh, no, we didn't. We had Ranger ahead of him. Okay, so we had Framber, Ranger, Cease. Imai, we had a few spots lower, but there are definitely some people in the industry that thinks he belongs in this conversation as well. We're going to have a lot more on Tetsuya Imai later this week. But he's in this conversation as well. Do you regret how we ranked these? Have you had any updated thoughts since we did this a few weeks ago?
I have tons of regrets on everything I've ever done. But as it pertains to this specific conversation, I probably would have flipped Cease and Ranger just because of Cease's bulk is something that teams really do prioritize and do value. And the more I think about Framber, the more I like it. The more I like him, the more I'd be in. Just because of what he has been for so long, right? We're going on 5 years of him being effectively the same pitcher. And he is such a weird pitcher. I'm not saying weird because I don't know a single other person in the world named Framber or him, allegedly attacking his catcher with a baseball. I say weird because it's sinker curveball. No one else is doing sinker curveball, right? And I think that alone will help him age well enough. Because unless someone else starts doing sinker curveball, Framber's going to be a unique look every time you're facing him. And I don't think he's an ace. I would not pay him like an ace. I would not go above 2. But if I'm the Red Sox or the Giants, right, and I'm looking to pair a legit experienced number 2 starter behind my no doubt MFer, like Framber is the guy I would pick from this trio. Pretty definitive.
I think I agree with that. I mean, the really simple way to put it is it's different mix. He's a year older, but it's not that different from Max Fried. And he's been more durable. If you're just looking at the top pitchers that have gotten the big money because they get a lot of ground balls and they get a lot of outs, that was Max Fried more than any of the other pitchers that have gotten, like, strikeout rate is not outrageous, 24, 23%. Fromber definitely walks more guys. That is significant. But he's been more durable than Fried, and the ERA is pretty similar, over a large sample of the previous few years. Maybe Fried a little bit better. I don't think he's going to get 200, but I am with you. I think Fromber is pretty clearly the safest of this bunch. Ranger is a fun version of Fromber because it's also, lefty, sinkers, whatever. But the velo being much farther down, and yes, he's younger, which helps. But I mean, Ranger's throwing like 90, 90, 91. I mean, that is, and that's something already. Maybe you build it back up. And then Cease, it's just going to be about the fit. I mean, if he lands with the right team, we're going to be like, holy crap, watch out. They're going to get this guy right. And I'm still a believer in him, but Cease essentially has the highest ERA, whether it's a 1 year or 3 year split of pretty much any pitcher that has gotten 100 million in the last ever, right? It's only so many starting pitchers that have gotten 100 million, and no one else has had as high of an ERA as Dylan Cease. And I think Dylan Cease is getting $100 million. I feel very confident that is going to happen, and it will be unprecedented, basically. So that is compelling.
I'm adding a question to this list, impromptu, off of Dylan Cease. Which player, if they sign with the Dodgers, will piss off the most people? Okay? Like, if the Dodgers sign Dylan Cease, it will be like, oh, they're just doing, like, weird. They're just, like, if they sign Dylan
weirdly
Cease from
more
the Padres,
than Kyle Tucker?
like, well, I'm saying, like, is Kyle Tucker number one, right? Is Kyle Tucker the player that would most piss off the Dodgers, like, piss people off that the Dodgers signed them? Is it Murakami? Because it's like every good Japanese player just ends up with the Dodgers. Is it Bo Bichette? Because it's like, if you can't beat him, join him, right? Like, what would you say?
They all have a different flavor. Kyle Tucker feels the most realistic, but Bo Bichette also, especially if they sure could use a second baseman. So yeah, no, it's a good question. I think narrative-wise, Murakami, because he doesn't fit on the team like at all, I think would be,
or is it Edwin
pretty
Diaz?
Frustrating. No, because I mean, whatever. Anything the Dodgers are going to do is going to piss people off. So if you're ranking them, but Diaz, you'd be like, well, yeah, their bullpen was awful. Like, of course they're getting Edwin Diaz.
Right, now, if they sign Diaz, it's like
signed Tanner Scott, but still.
Yes.
I don't know. I honestly think if they signed Kyle Tucker, people would kind of just be like, oh yeah, okay.
I think it's Bichette. I think
Bichette and Murakami would be my two picks.
Bichette, what he did in Game 7, like what he meant to that team in Toronto, the idea that they don't really need him.
It would hurt.
Like, he'd be the starting second baseman, right? I think that's the one that would infuriate the most people.
Yeah, it would be the biggest bummer. I would say that for sure. But, they're going to get one of these guys. I mean, them signing another pitcher would be really funny. Them signing another pitcher would be very funny, I will say.
Like Gallen.
Yeah. Oh, God. I would feel bad for Snakes fans. All right. Couple more questions. Does Scott Boras finally get these long-term contracts for his repeat clients? That's Alex Bregman. That's Pete Alonso. That's Cody Bellinger. He has other clients here, but these three guys have already been through free agency. And I feel like rank in terms of confidence that they're getting a multi-year deal, that they're getting a 5-year contract.
Bellinger.
You think Bellinger is more likely than Bregman?
Interesting.
You might be right.
Yes, because of the age.
Yeah. Just feels so silly if Bellinger ends up on another 3-year for 120. Like, I also have to imagine he doesn't really want to do that again. Man, Pete.
I think Bellinger. I think Bellinger would probably take 500 from the Yankees, right?
Right. Yeah. I don't know, but again, this is Boras. Let's see, because Soto covered up for a lot last year. We were not really that focused on some of these other L's, but this time there's some potential pitfalls here. So, Let's see what you got, Scott. The Scobo lives on. I'm so glad it's back. Two more questions. First one. This is like an annual thing, and it applies differently for kind of how players end up there. Which players are the toughest to envision wearing another uniform? Because you have a few ones who have literally been lifelong players at these spots, and that's, of course, Bo Bichette, that's Ranger Suarez, that's Pete, that's Fromber. We already started to think about it with Pete, so like that I'm kind of moving to the side. Yes, of course, if he leaves the Mets, it'll be weird, but we already went through all this mental stuff last year, so I'm not really thinking about that. Schwarber, we've obviously seen on multiple other teams, and so I don't think it will look weird, even if it's hard to imagine him leaving the Phillies. Bellinger, sort of same thing. Of course, he doesn't mean quite to the Yankees what the Schwarber does to the Phillies. I think Bo is, still the hardest for me to imagine. Not that it can't happen, but will be the most upsetting if it does happen. Is I think still pretty comfortably Bo Bichette wearing another uniform.
And then Edwin Diaz, who we really all year were not thinking about as part of this free agent class, right? People didn't think he was going to opt. It's like, how could he opt? How could he be that good to, one up the largest reliever contract in the history of the sport? Well, he was that good. But the idea of, the Trumpets moving to another town, would they do it still? Like, there's a lot about Edwin Diaz that has just gotten so embedded in Mets world where it would be difficult for him to think about somewhere else.
I agree. And honestly, I'm kind of torn whether Hay or Pete is more likely to stay at this point. Because I feel like Diaz, I don't know. We can save that for another time. But Diaz is related to our final question, which is just like, what does this relief market end up looking like? He's in his own category. He's got a QO. He's going to get the biggest contract. But there are a lot of famous relievers, a whole bunch of famous relievers. Now, that's just like the ones that are really good still and that we expect to get money. That's, Robert Suarez and two guys who had tough times in New York, and Helsley and Devin Williams, but like still a lot to like. But then like some capital C closers that are still hanging out, whether that's Kenley Jansen, whether that's Raisel Iglesias, who was sneaky awesome in the second half after being awesome for several years in a row. And then you got all these Fairbanks. Fairbanks is a late entry who has been very much kind of a headlining ninth inning guy in recent years that now he's kind of in the mix. And then you got all the funky guys, right? Tyler Rogers and Danny Coulombe and Brad Keller coming out of nowhere. Could he get some money? So no shortage of relievers. We mentioned it earlier with the Mariners. And which of these guys, there's always a couple of them that like get a 3-year deal. And you're like, whoa, okay, all right. Tyler Rogers got $40 million. Like totally possible. We'll see. So are there any relievers that really jump out for you?
I think Iglesias and Robert Suarez are very interesting to me because it's a very rare combination of dominance on the other side of 30, right? Like they're 35 and 36. And so it's like, based upon the performance alone, you would give them a multi-year deal. But do they get that because teams are scared off by the age?
Yeah. And then I'll just finish on Kenley Jansen, who's still trucking. I mean, he said, he's still trying to climb that saves leaderboard and had a 2.59 this year. I know the FIP wasn't awesome, but like someone's going to sign Kenley again. And whether it'll be on a team as irrelevant as the Angels, we'll see. But he's, of course, one of the greatest closers of all time. And it will be interesting to see if he can continue, especially as we think about that trio with him and Kimbrel and Aroldis Chapman. Obviously, Chapman apparently still peaking. Kimbrel totally off the radar. And now Kenley's, somewhere in the middle there. So he is another one I am definitely thinking about. All right, Jake, we have one final topic before we say goodbye. You got a little field report for us.
I went to the baseball stadium yesterday, which is always weird in the winter because you get to park in the good stadium lot, and you just walk in and everyone's wearing a coat and there's something weird going on the field always, whether it's like golf or, winter wonderland. But I was in Nats Park yesterday for the introduction of the newest manager for the Washington Nationals, Blake Butera. Now, the headliner here is his age, and it was a main character at the press conference yesterday. Blake Butera is just 33 years old. Jordan, he was a rising high school senior when the Washington Nationals drafted Bryce Harper. Okay? Think about that.
Okay. Yep. Wow.
Right? He was in the same draft. Blake Butera was in the same draft 2 rounds ahead of Jake Irvin when Jake Irvin was taken out of high school. Jake Irvin, current pitcher for the Washington Nationals. Blake Butera is a baby, 33 years old, just a couple years older than us. And he is the youngest manager in 50 years. Okay? Now, there's only one guy on the Nats, Trevor Williams, who's older than him, so we won't have like that dynamic necessarily. But it was clear yesterday that the Washington Nationals are sufficiently and definitively zagging. For years, they were kind of stuck in the past. Even when they won the World Series in 2019, I think around the league, it was like, this thing's going to fall apart quickly. They were not drafting and developing. They had fallen very much behind. That led to the firings of Mike Rizzo and David Martinez, their longtime GM and manager this summer, replaced by Paul Taboni, T-Bone, as I guess he is called, and now Blake Butera. And yeah, dude, like it was cool. Butera, a guy we've known for a while, which is just, again, I don't know if we told the story. I think we did on the show, but Jordan and I did a bit a long time ago when we were at Cut 4 at MLB.com, where we went to a Staten Island Yankees game and wore GoPros, and we were the Bat Boys in the dugout, like during the game. And I was in the visiting dugout for the Tri-Cities
Hudson Valley.
The Hudson Valley Renegades, excuse me. And he was the manager. Blake Butera was the manager, and he very quickly clocked that I was an abnormal presence. And he was like, "What are you?" And I told him, and we got to talking, and we've stayed in touch. And now he's the manager in the city that I live in. And I cannot believe it. At that time, Blake was only 25 years old, managing a minor league team, which was significant, right? And so, yeah, good for the Nats. No half measures.
Yeah, no, it's a new era there, and I'm excited to see what that looks like. So
the coolest,
plenty more field reports to come. Yeah,
the coolest nugget yesterday from that was just, so his wife was pregnant, Caroline, and the baby was due the day that he got the offer to be the manager. So he got the offer, the baby came out into the world, fatherhood, first kid, then he signed the contract. What a day.
That's pretty big. Pretty solid day at the hospital for Blake Butera. Very excited for him. Right. Very excited to see him. I don't even know if the Nats are coming to Cleveland this year, but hopefully I will see him at some point. Well, we'll see him at the winter meetings. So that I'm looking forward to for sure. We are done talking, but more talking later this week. Oh my goodness. Big day of news today as we have Rule 5 protections and all that fun stuff. You can email us at baseballbarbacast@gmail.com. Thank you to Andrew Hartz and Ingrid Rosas for producing this beast of an episode. And we will talk to you all on Friday with a special guest. Bye.